Welcome to the show. I'm Vivian Kobusingye Birchall, your host. Our special guest on this episode of Healthcare Blind Spots is Mr. Lamine Savadogo, the President of Madison Energy Systems and the Global Ambassador for Africa at the Edison Electric Institute. Mr. Savadogo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very glad and honored to be here.
It's good to have you back at the studio. And this time we are just going to focus the conversation around healthcare systems and how they interface with the electricity or with the energy sector. So maybe to kick us off, for the benefit of those who have not seen any of our interviews before, could you please introduce yourself, tell us what you do in a little bit more detail, and then we can start from there.
Okay. Thank you, Vivian. Before we go any further, I'd like to first of all congratulate you for your admission to the Harvard Medical School, which will even increase your credentials to talk about this. And also thank you about your wide view, in the sense that you recently published an article on breast cancer for men. And that is a topic that people don't usually associate men with. So you brought that to people's attention. I'd like to thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
On behalf of all the men.
Thank you.
I don't have that issue, but many of men do. So thank you for bringing attention to it.
Oh, you're welcome.
So as you said, my name is Lamine Savadogo. I'm the president of Madison Energy Systems, which is based here in Massachusetts, business development and technological financial intermediation between the United States and Africa. Our work is essentially in the electric power sector. In addition to that, I wear a hat as a global ambassador for the Edison Electric Institute, which is the association of all investor-owned electric utilities here in the U.S. EEI members provide about 70% of the electricity consumed here and provide electricity to 250 million people in all the 50 states. Additionally, we also have 70 international members, utilities that have operation in 90 countries around the world. So we have dialogues, exchanges to exchange experiences and ideas on the leading issues for the power sector worldwide. Lastly, I'd like to also mention that I have a small nonprofit organization which is involved in developing water systems in rural sectors in Mali. So 3 hats.
Well, first of all, needless to say, with that introduction, you are the perfect person to be on this show to talk about what we're talking about today, which you have wide experience with the electricity sector here in the United States and globally. And you also have worked on the ground in areas of low and middle income communities. So you understand the needs in those areas. And you're from Mali, which has also kind of a fragmented healthcare system like Uganda. So with that in mind, when we talk about electricity and healthcare, what comes to your mind as somebody who has had interactions with both sectors, both at the technical level and as a consumer?
Okay. I think you, me, all our viewers, all of us, from the day we're born to the day we leave this earth, we consume both healthcare services and electricity. One, in this modern day and age, does not function without the other. If you think about your last visit to your doctor, the doctor's office, I think of mine. I go, here in the Boston area, you have touchless where you wave, the door opens, you get in the elevator, you go to your doctor's office. Before you see them, you go to the bathroom, you wave again, water comes from the tap, you wash your hands, you have soap, you have a dryer. All of these things are powered by electricity. And once you get into the doctor's office, you find a lit, comfortable room where your consultation takes place. They have different types of equipment, blood pressure monitors and all kinds of things. Even the exam chair that you sit on can be adjusted up and down with electricity. So that goes to say on a very basic level. Now, if you do have a problem and you have to be treated, you have to go to the emergency room. You see all kinds of equipment from machines that will help them anesthetize you, the operating table itself, the lights that the doctors have to have in order to be able to operate properly. If one of any of these devices is interrupted for 1 minute, the consequences are disastrous. And we have to also think of the younger ones, the neonatal units in the hospitals, where babies who are prematurely born have to be kept comfortable in incubators. A lot of machinery is used, and these days computers provide some of the regulation of all of these things. So you have essentially an entire system providing energy, both in terms of electricity and natural gas, to make sure that the healthcare system takes place. And I'd like to, when we talk about neonatal units, I just wanted to say a little something about that. The CDC estimates that in 2021, there were about 3.6 million births in the U.S. About 10% of those are premature babies.
Oh,
so
wow.
about, 3.6, 3.7, 367,000 babies that have to be kept alive. And I'd like to also to mention some famous people who were born prematurely. If those cares didn't exist, they wouldn't exist. We have Winston Churchill, we have Isaac Newton, we have Sidney Poitier, one person that I admire. We have Stevie Wonder. We have a lot of famous people who were prematurely born but kept alive with these kinds of things. So that's how pervasive the intersection between electricity and healthcare is.
The way you have presented it is so powerful because naturally I started thinking about all my interactions with the healthcare system and how, without electricity, some of the things in my life would not have happened. And I have the privilege of, living in the United States here, and especially when it comes to prenatal services, So now, obviously, I come from I was born and raised in Uganda, so naturally I think about the people who live there, mothers who are probably going to have premature babies, and just the scenario you presented, the hope for their survival is so minimum. So, and that's just only one scenario. There are so many, we had looking at conflicts, and you and I were having a conversation earlier about these conflict areas and lack of electricity for people to survive in. So can you just speak to, what are some of the concerns or the challenges of not having adequate electricity in all communities that are struggling?
Okay. So let me finish a little bit about the visit to the doctor's office. If they need to have some exams, they will draw your blood right there. And there is a pharmacy either in the facility or somewhere nearby. And here, in the case of Massachusetts, by the time you get in your car and you drive home, you start receiving the results of some of those tests. So contrast that with a situation in a healthcare center in Africa, even a major hospital, where sometimes the lab is somewhere else. So you will come, you will hope that there is no power outage that day. The doctor sees you, so you have to go to the other part of the city to have your test, to have your blood drawn and have a test performed. And it could be that someday you get there, the lab is closed because there is no power. So, or you will find in a lot of people waiting, you have to wait, and then it gets to be around your turn, or we say, sorry, there is a power outage right now. So that happens in many places in Africa. So the doctor will have to establish your diagnosis without the help of the results of this blood test, which is extremely important. And that's if we are in the city. In the rural areas, that's not even an option. Yeah. When you go to the health centers there, it's not even an option. So the doctors are not, do not have access to all this technology that can help them diagnose and treat their patients. So you have a lot of people who needlessly die because the facilities do not have the necessary modern equipment to help the doctors do their job quickly.
Right, and so in your profession as somebody who is an ambassador and who's been an advocate for advancing electricity in at least Africa, what are some of the ways that, maybe even before I ask that question, what are some of the trends of consumption of electricity in comparison between, say, the United States or the Western world and Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, whichever you choose to?
Okay. Well, there is such a big wide gap. We have about 2.5 million megawatt of installed capacity here in this country, which is tremendous. The United States is the second largest producer and consumer of electricity worldwide, behind China. We are 340 million people here. They have 1.2 billion people there. So contrast that with Africa, where in many places the access rate can be as little as 30%. And that access rate doesn't mean that the power is on all the time. If we look at a well-developed country like South Africa, relatively speaking, they have been experiencing for the last 3-4 years big problems with the electric power system, where they have days where they don't have electricity. In many other countries around the continent, you have this issue. So basic issues cannot happen. So in this country, when it comes to the healthcare sector, they have what they call the social determinant of healthcare. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yes, I have.
And there are 5 of them, and one of the biggest one is a stable economic environment. A stable economy that it depends on stable energy, stable electricity, essentially. So if in a country you can have 12 hours without electricity, so that means that the women who have their small restaurants, they have refrigerators to refrigerate their meat before they cook it. You have some shops where people do all kinds of things. Even people who repair tires when there is where you have a flat. All of that is energy dependent these days. The carpenters who make things, all of these people will have to stop doing their work. If there is no electricity, they cannot work. If they cannot work, they don't make money. If they don't make money, they cannot take care of their families. If they don't make money, they don't generate income on which the government can take taxes to take care of the people who are not making money. So the cascading impact is so big that it's very difficult. So we are all thinking and working together to try to see how can we solve this problem.
Right.
Okay.
And when you're in those conversations about how to solve these problems, what are some of the immediate steps that can be taken? Maybe I should first ask, why has an electricity or energy sector in Africa struggled? I have to put you on the spot.
Wow, that's how much time do we have?
All day for you for this conversation.
Yeah, it's a long history, but for the power sector to work, you need 3 essential components. You need first the regulatory environment, the environment that makes it possible for whatever company, whether it's private or public, to operate with guidelines that are clear Okay, you need that it has to make economic sense. You produce a good that is valuable, and you have to be able to sell it for a price that is less than you produce it for. And the other element, which is extremely important also, is technology. Okay, so regulation, technology, economics. You put those together, that's what can make a country's electricity sector work. Now, in Africa, many times those three elements are not combined harmoniously. The regulatory issues, in many cases, are decided outside Africa, and in some cases imposed. And people don't really think about how you relate it. For instance, here, we have over 3,000 electric power utilities. We have some that are owned by the federal government, some that are owned by the state, some that are owned by municipalities, but the majority is owned by the private sector. So it is the regulation that allows those private sector companies to say, okay, this is a capital-intensive industry. We're going to take money for investors and put it in this sector, produce electricity. So the government in return will tell them, okay, we'll give you the authorization to work in this area. We know that you're going to invest this money. We also want to give you a benefit. So whatever your cost is, we're going to guarantee you a certain rate of return on your investment.
Right.
So then everybody is certain that, if you work hard, you meet the criteria set by the regulatory authorities, then you can generate income and pay dividends to your shareholders. Now, if you don't have that environment, all put together, then you have a lot of problems, and then you have economic issues. As I said, it's a capital-intensive industry. Buying equipment, none of it is manufactured in Africa. Installing it, keeping it going is a very, very expensive proposition.
I think I will build on to that. The capital, you've mentioned it twice now. It's very capital intensive. So as you're looking at having these conversations, I'll go back to the question I was about to ask. What are some of the immediate steps that can be taken to really bridge this electricity gap, say in Africa, or any low and middle income country really that has similar challenges? What are some steps that can be taken?
Okay, my own feeling is that we're talking about capital. That in Africa, we have focused on looking for that capital outside of Africa. Okay? Because people believe that there is not enough capital in Africa to finance at least some of these things. That paradigm has to be shifted.
Right.
Okay, so that the people who raise the capital, first of all, learn to properly evaluate what capital is available. A lot of it is not in banks. Some of it is in mattresses. Some of it is in cattle, like in your own country.
Yes.
Some of it is that in those kinds of wealth that are, if there is a drought, your cattle is gone.
Right.
Okay? If there is a fire, whatever money you put in your mattress is gone, and not counting on the impact of inflation. Now, if you could convince those people, listen, we can take your money, okay, and invest it in electric power sector, produce electricity and sell it at a profit, and not only the capital you invested will keep growing, but also you will get dividends as you go. And that's pedagogical in a sense. I don't think that the financial sector has been able to talk to people to make them understand. Because in many countries, when there is a looming crisis, like there is a war, and the government comes and says, we need money to buy this to defend our country, people will contribute.
They will.
So that's one big issue that we have to think about. And I also think that the big numbers that they throw out there, oh, Africa needs so many billions of dollars. Some of it, I think, from my perspective, is inflated. Inflated because people compensate for what the perception of risk. So they add those costs so that everybody is sort of, oh my God, how are we going to raise the $100 billion a year? Yeah. So that is an issue. So the Africans have to start self-reliance first. Try to figure out their own needs. Every African utility should be able to quantify what they need in terms of power generation. That capability should be local. It shouldn't be a consultant that you take from somewhere who comes and basically gets the information from you and put it in a nice PowerPoint presentation and goes to make money.
Right.
Okay. So governance is another issue. Governance, the power sector is a sacred cow. You have to leave it alone. Give it to people who know how to run it. Give them the independence. The politics has to be outside of it. Okay.
Right. When I think of governance and the politics has to be out of it, sometimes the definition of politics is gray, and this is why. For example, if we want to build collaborations in the African region, I'm thinking of a body like the African Free Continental Trade Area, and that has bargaining power almost, not almost, but to really transform a sector like the electricity sector, in my opinion, obviously. So how can we work on giving the electricity or energy sector that autonomy that you have just described while working with political organs and governments to make sure that they are playing the role that they need to play to raise capital and to make sure that infrastructure is being built for hospitals, for all these areas that critically need electricity.
Okay. Well, we all saluted the Continental Trade Agreement.
Yeah.
It's going to take time to implement the whole thing. Okay, it's not something, people shouldn't look at it that it's going to happen overnight. Okay, it's a lot of things that have to be harmonized. There are national interests that people are not necessarily willing to give up. Okay, and it's going to take some time for us to do that. So once we do, electricity is great because it can cross borders easily.
Right.
Okay?
That's why I mentioned the agreement, because it's powerful.
Yeah, it can cross borders. But even then, when you get the politics involved, okay? So you are Uganda, you produce electricity, you export it to Kenya. Somehow your president and the Kenyan president have an issue. If one of them has the ability to pick up the phone and tell the head of a power company, they say, cut the electricity to those guys in Kenya. We're going to show them. That should never happen. Okay? Yeah. So that's why people are insisting on keeping some of their power. I'll give you some example. You may recall about 4 years ago, the countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council, the 6 countries there, decided to put an embargo on Qatar. Okay? They cut everything to Qatar. But they did not cut electricity because the system is made such a way that if you cut such a big consumer of electricity and the transmissions go through them, you will create an imbalance.
Right.
They cut everything, even the supply of milk, and even Qatari aircraft could not fly over some of the countries they had to make, but they left the electricity flowing. Okay, so if we do that, that's what I mean, getting the politics out of it.
Right.
That we just let the things flow as they would. We let people who know the business run the business, that the president doesn't impose his cousin, okay, and he would let the most capable person
Right.
run the power company.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Then I go back to the whole the merge between the electricity sector and healthcare sector. So why is it hard for those two sectors to work together so that electricity is prioritized
Okay.
for, say, healthcare centers and hospitals?
It's not hard because first of all, wherever you have your dispatch, schedule, there are some priority areas where you don't cut. You don't cut. Whatever happens, there are places that there will always be power for Emerson Hospital, either from the grid or you have backup systems that are there. So we know that there are strategic areas that you have to keep the electricity. Now, what we are trying to do is also to make sure that the healthcare sector becomes I would say, consumption, just like everybody else, that the consumption that there are some energy-saving devices, in the electric power sector. Because if you do an audit of any hospital, you will find areas where the power consumption can be reduced,
Right.
and which would be in their own interest because it will reduce their own consumption. I read somewhere an estimate that the hospitals, we have about 6,100 hospitals in the country.
Oh, okay. Wow.
61, between the privately owned, the state-owned,
Right.
The small community health centers. The exact number was 6,129 in 2021. All right. They consume about $8 billion of electricity. It's a lot of money.
That's a lot.
So if you are able to go to work with organization that can come and do an audit to make sure that what you don't need that you are not consuming, just like we do this with our homes. If hospitals agree to that idea, and many do, then that will help a lot so that we can work together and not have to build new power plants that are not needed because there is some excess consumption.
Right. And I don't know if I've asked this before, but Africa is blessed by the sun. Why aren't we investing in solar energy?
We are.
Okay, well, we are slowly getting there.
Yes.
But why hasn't that been like a priority? Because that is an easier way of getting energy.
All right. The thing about solar, as you know, the costs have been going down exponentially. So what was an issue before because of capital requirement is easier now. That's one. The second issue, which is very important, is the intermittent nature of solar or wind. Okay, as we know, the sun doesn't shine every day and it doesn't shine at night.
Right.
So that becomes an issue because then you have to be able to capture the sun's energy during the day and store it to use at night. Okay, storage technology is still expensive. Okay, it's still very expensive. The batteries that you can use to store electricity that you capture from the sun is still expensive. This is an issue that is affecting the entire industry because the growth of renewable energy, even here, is slightly handicapped by this issue. And there is a technology called long duration energy storage. So that, let's say we are in a big blizzard here and there is no sun for 3 days. Okay? So, and we have a lot of renewable in our system. So we have to have been able to store enough energy to supply the system until the sun comes back here. So that's what is called long duration energy storage. It can come in the form of batteries, it can come in form of pumped hydro, but so the industry is working on it with the help of the government. It's actually a worldwide concern. So, and long duration energy storage is for anything that about 10 hours and up.
Right.
Okay? 10 hours and up to 2-3 days. So that at least we are sure that the hospitals we are talking about are not going to be out of electricity because, there was a blizzard and the power lines are down, and what do we do now?
Right. And so
that's an issue in Africa. And then, the other issue is you build it, sometimes you have to be able to transport it.
Oh, yeah.
Because Africa, urbanization is, a trend, and the space in the cities is very limited to deploy solar farms.
There is no more space in the cities.
Exactly. So the rooftops there are not enough. So then you have to build these solar farms outside of the city and transport the electricity to where the consumption centers are. And that is still, that technology is still imperfect because there are a lot of losses as you transport the electricity. And also, how do you, so the way you have also other sources of power, like thermal power plants or hydro, how do you harmonize over the integration of renewable sources to traditional sources of electricity?
Right. Going back to the health sector. So the health sector is broad, certainly. There is the hospitals, there is the pharmaceutical companies, and there is, all kinds of stakeholders. So looking at the manufacturing of healthcare equipment, so I'm learning that there are some innovations that say, I was talking to a classmate yesterday about in Rwanda, I think they have something that a group has invented, some kind of thing that warms up babies who are premature. So we were talking about premature babies earlier. That is solar powered. So have you seen any trend of these pharmatech companies coming up with innovative solutions that can be used in low resource settings that have, unpredictable power supplies?
Oh, yes. The industry, I must say, there is a lot of innovation going on. Sometimes we see some, sometimes we don't. But every time if you don't go to see a doctor, you go a year later for your, annual checkup. You see new equipment, new procedures, new abilities to get information. Well, that's one thing I didn't talk about. The computing power.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to collect information from the patients, process it, store it, so that it can be used in the treatment of a patient. That takes it requires a lot of electricity.
In Uganda, we still use paper.
Okay.
Paper files.
All right. So
in some hospitals.
Okay. That in many places in the world, you have patients walking from appointment to appointment with the paper files.
Right.
And
it's sad.
Yeah, with the problem that sometimes it gets lost and
right.
But here computers help with all of that. So there is innovation going on. There are some big medical trade shows where you go, you are amazed by the equipments that are coming on the market. And some of the places like in India and China, there are really some amazing I've seen some smaller dialysis machines, okay? In many countries, the dialysis is maybe in 2 or 3 cities. That's it. So imagine if you have a kidney problem, and you live in a village, what do you do? Okay, yeah. So the kidney dialysis, portable ones, they have smaller anesthesia machines also, because can you imagine if you have to operate someone without anesthesia? It's a big issue. So that innovation is happening. Okay. People in the field communicate with other people. There are that interaction is always going on.
Yeah, obviously you mentioned about, having to operate on someone without anesthesia, and that's probably happening in conflict areas.
Exactly.
And many places where, the power supply is very irregular, or I can't count the number of times we had power outages growing up in Uganda. And speaking of communities that don't have equipment, I was chatting the other day with a radiation oncologist in Uganda, and about what we have, what the needs that the country has, or the Cancer Institute has, and then in comparison to even other countries within Africa that don't even have some of this equipment, like linear accelerators. I learned that there's no linear accelerator in Malawi. I think, if I got the country correct, and that was startling. And and I thought Uganda, which has 3, was lacking. In your opinion, what are some of the sectors that need to work together to kind of address the electricity needs and the healthcare needs in the same region?
Okay. As we were talking earlier about priorities, so in every country, even those that don't have enough electricity, hospitals get priority. And the system should be built around that idea, that regardless of what happens, the hospitals will be the last one to have power cut. And even then, there is a backup system that is essential, okay, to make sure that the power company, so the government, even if it's not economically viable, the government can provide some subsidies so that the hospitals' electricity or energy needs are taken care of in priority, more so than anything else. And so if we look at what happens in Africa, because of this unreliability of the electric power sector, that generates a lot of what we would call medical tourism.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all the important people in the government and the business people who can afford it spend millions and millions to go and get treated in Turkey, in Tunisia, in India, even here in the United States or Canada. That's a lot of money.
It is.
So sometimes from one government official that you fly to London to have them treated, that could help build some facility, or at least strengthen a facility that will take care of many, many people. So how do we integrate all of those things? Somebody has to have an oversight to say, this is how we are spending money right now. Last year, this is how much we spent. We sent 10 ministers or 10 cabinet secretaries to England, or that money, what could we have done with it?
Right.
Okay, so that's at a governmental level. And then the power sector has to know that around the healthcare facilities, you have to have a super strengthened electricity delivery system. Yes.
And in terms of stakeholders, who are the most critical stakeholders for this to happen? In addition to governments, obviously.
Okay. The stakeholders are all of us.
Okay.
Because everybody needs healthcare at some point or the other. Which reminds me of a very interesting quote that Ralph Waldo Emerson said, that health is the first wealth.
That is true.
Okay? And each one of us, those who have it, those who don't have it, we all have to make sure that it is available in the form of quality facilities, manpower, because that's important, training facilities to keep replenishing the staff that works in hospitals, and making sure that the conditions are met. Because if you are sick, another saying by a Canadian writer is that health is the crown on the head of a healthy that only the sick can see.
Ah, wow, that is powerful.
Okay?
Health is a crown on the healthy that only the sick can
Yeah,
see.
the crown on the head
That is
of
so
a
powerful.
healthy that only the sick can see.
That is so powerful.
So, so we have to make sure, even if we are not sick, okay? Because as I said, one point, either we ourselves or family members are going to get sick. Again, when you visit the hospital, that's when you see it.
Right.
You see people dying. And an image that I will never forget is the late Steve Jobs.
Oh, yeah.
With billions of dollars in the bank, with access to the best care available. When he was launching the iPhone, you saw how emaciated he was. None of his billions could save him. Okay? So that's at that big level. How do we make sure that many of us can have access to the care that would allow us, the diseases that we know about, to be diagnosed in time and to be treated? That means that the healthcare system is efficient and is properly equipped, so that when you go, you can do the tests easily, you can get the results easily, and to get it in the hands of a treating physicians.
I cannot water that down by adding anything else. I think that is a perfect way to just end this, because that is a powerful scenario and vision and assessment of the need and why we need to prioritize healthcare sector. Maybe before we end, is there anything else we haven't talked about that you would like to tell our viewers?
Well, since we are today, November 16th, I cannot help but think about two important issues that are happening right now that impacts the global, the globe as a whole. One is the visit of the president of China in San Francisco, and who is going to be meeting with President Biden. Together, the two biggest polluters on Earth have decided that they are going to work together to tackle global, warming, as opposed to competing. That, for me, is a big source of joy. The other event that is coming up towards the end of the month is COP28. That is coming. About 200 countries are going to meet in Dubai to set goals for next year. Zero emission goals, carbon emission goals. I am hoping that this time they will do a much better job than they did last night. Because if we look at how the world was powered in 2022, we see that there was a little uptake in the production of electricity with coal. It's a 1% uptake, because some countries, because of the situation in Ukraine, in Germany and other places, people had to restart coal power plants that they thought they wouldn't need. And I think we have to be careful that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and I didn't want to get into that because, when you're talking about COP, last year there were so many resolutions and commitments made and all these fancy, and everyone came out just feeling so optimistic. Sometimes we can't foresee conflict. Sometimes we can foresee it. Mm-hmm. So what would be your recommendations?
They're not going to listen to me.
We can just put it out there.
But there are nations become selfish when it comes to issues that have an impact on the situation. Let's say South Africa, which was producing most of its electricity with coal, and so you tell South Africa to cut their coal. You tell the government of Senegal, you found a large deposit of natural gas, but we're not going to let you use it because that's going to increase the carbon emission. And Senegal has its people, South Africa have their people who need electricity. So how do we work together so the rich nations which have been responsible and which are still responsible for producing
Emissions.
have to be very have to accept their responsibility and help, and that will take a lot of negotiation. It will take forbearance, because the pollutions don't need a visa.
True.
You know, carbon goes wherever it wants.
True.
You know, they don't look at borders. So carbon produced in country X can affect the country Y, and we don't have anywhere else to go. This is our home. You know, maybe Jeff Bezos can go to Mars, or you know, the billionaires can fly somewhere else, but all of us have to stay here. And it's us, and it's our children and their children. We have to leave them a planet that is livable. So that means we all have to agree, you know, that we have to find an equitable way and a just way to be able to handle this big issue.
Well, you have just said the introduction to our next interview. I think it means you've set yourself up to come back to the studio, and we'll be talking about climate change, electricity, and healthcare, because all those are intertwined. You're saying that this is one Earth, which means if we're hurting it, we're hurting people's health, and that that shows the interconnectedness of all of this.
Yeah.
So with that, really, I want to say thank you for being my guest yet again.
Thank you for inviting me and giving me the platform.
Yeah, and I look forward to bringing you back. To our viewers, thank you for watching Healthcare Blind Spots. Till next time.